Thank you, Dr. Gibson, for being here, and God bless you as you speak.
Well, good morning, and it is great to be in Frankfurt again. And I've enjoyed the service already, haven't you? Yes. The song, I thought maybe they needed a bass, but I didn't jump in. I was at a camp one time getting ready to speak, and the coolies were singing, and I was making a few bass notes, just sitting in the front row, and I realized I was hearing my own notes, and my mic was already on. So I stopped because I didn't know if they really wanted my contribution or not to their sound. But it is great to be here. And that last congregational song, I have never heard that one that I remember. I'm at the age where I don't really enjoy learning new songs. I like old Southern gospel, stuff but I enjoyed that one. I really like that song. It's got a tremendous message to it, and it's encouraging to my heart. It's good to see so many that I have grown up with. Some of you are getting gray hair. Can you imagine? We grew up together. So what's that tell me, I guess? But it is great to be here and to talk about what God is doing in some faraway places. It's been strange times, hasn't it? I try to stay positive about most things, but on one thing I'm glad to be negative. And I've been tested negative at least a dozen times. If you're in healthcare, you've probably been tested many, many times, but I get tested for my travels, and the worst ones that I've had were one in the Dominican Republic and one last week. Both Hispanic countries. I don't know if that makes any difference, but they run the thing up so far, and it feels like it's got acid on it, like it's burning a hole in your brain. The lady in the Dominican Republic actually dropped it on the floor before she put it up my nose, but I didn't even bother to object. I mean, it didn't matter. She probably has to keep count of how many of them, and she couldn't waste one, couldn't throw one away, so she used it. But I've been tested negative every time, and so it's complicated, and I could tell you some stories about being stuck in places trying to meet the requirements and trying to figure out how I'm going to get out, but and especially, of course, with the feeling that so much of it is just not real anyway. You just wonder. You go down to Haiti, and they're all crowded together all the time, and nobody wearing masks, and they've hardly had any COVID. They've had a little bit. It's like, okay, what's wrong with this picture? And in places where you go in, they say, well, you had the wrong one. You've got to take this one, and it just happens to cost $200. And when I landed in Alaska, I don't want to take up too much time with this. You've been talking about this for a year already, but landed in Alaska, and that was when I had the wrong test. And they said, okay, you got to take this one right here at the airport. And I was only going to be there a day and a half, and I wasn't going to get the test results for 3 days. So I was going to be gone before I even got the results of the test that I had to have to enter. But I paid and went through it. But it's been great times, and you wonder how much is real. So much gets associated with COVID. Everything's a COVID-related death. I heard of a lady, she asked her husband, can we buy new clothes with our stimulus check? And he said, well, if you lose some weight, we'll think about it. And they counted his death as a COVID-related death. But, just all these things that circulate. And travel is complicated, and I didn't travel for a while. Of course, some churches weren't even having services, but then international as well. And they think we're dying like flies over here in other countries because of the stuff we put out. They think the U.S. is the most dangerous place to be. And so, anybody coming, some countries just won't let an American come in, period, no matter what. Doesn't matter if you were tested the day before. You're not coming in if you have an American passport. You're carrying the bubonic plague or something. But we're still trying and making trips. As complicated as it is, we're still doing it. You've got to go on sometime. And so one of my trips recently was Haiti. It's been a few weeks ago now. And I noticed they were a little more careful than usual. But it wasn't because of COVID. The country's been in chaos for a while. They have a lot of rioting and people getting killed on the streets and so on. And I stand out a little bit down there. I don't look like a Haitian. Maybe because I'm tall. Maybe maybe other reasons, I don't know, but I'm easily recognized, and so the people who escort me around, they're nervous, to be escorting an American around. And so I noticed that anytime we were getting ready to go somewhere, somebody'd go out first and look around, see who's on the street. They'd park the car as close to the door as they could and put me in it, that kind of thing, And then we did travel across country on a public bus on one trip, and we came upon this scene that's in the picture. And that is a hijacked bus that protesters in this town, they hijacked the bus, turned it across the road, and made everybody get off. Down the road a little ways, they had done the same thing, and which blocked a bunch of traffic in. A bunch of buses full of people that sat there all day because of these hijacked buses blocking them. And so I took this picture through the window of our bus, and like, okay, we're obviously not going any further like this. What are we going to do? And we didn't know, kind of a lawless situation, didn't know what would happen, and they were a little nervous about trying to get me through that, but we decided to try it. So they got some motorcycle guys, and they put a helmet on me, maybe to help hide my distinctiveness, and I put my money in my sock and thought they might not look there if they stopped me, and we drove right around the front of that bus and then around the next one that was down the road, and then called somebody to come get us. So nobody stopped us, so I don't know if that counts as an adventure or not. Some of these missionaries, they write books about their adventures. I don't have enough yet to do that, but anyway, it was an almost adventure. But a lot of things are happening. We are helping with food in Haiti right now. They are struggling some, not so much because of COVID, but because of the rioting and so on. And so there are a lot of people suffering. We are continuing to go forward. And that's been one interesting thing about this past year. You can't do some of the things that you wanted to do, and probably as a church, you've faced some of the same thing. You can't do some of the things that you would have wanted to do, but you find other ways to reach out. You find ways to innovate. And God has blessed those things, and He's helped us to do some of those things, some things that in new ways, things that we would not have done before. We are building an institute in Haiti. It has actually the roof on it, and it's going to be 2 levels. But we believe ministry training should be everywhere. If you have a business and you want to start a branch of it, what's the first thing you need? If you had one in Frankfurt and you want to start one in, I'm trying to remember what the towns are in it, Rossville or whatever. That's a town near here, isn't it? If you wanted to start a branch over there, what's the first thing you would need? Well, maybe. There's a lot of properties sitting empty, though. Money? Okay, well, I think we're getting there. Some of you are saying you need somebody there that knows how to do it. And especially whether it's a tire shop or a McDonald's or whatever, you need somebody that knows how to do it. That's what first thing you're going to need in a place like that. And especially when it comes to ministry. And that's why ministry training is so important. And you've heard me talk many times about getting ministry locally sustained. And that's still a principle that we go by. But then the training comes very close on the heels of that. Because local support and having a locally established ministry doesn't just mean that they support it financially. It means that you have to have people there that can take the lead, people that know how to do it, take responsibility. And so it's developing people. And so that's something that we really emphasize everywhere that we are working. In Haiti, we don't just have the institute that is going up, but we have a couple guys that travel all the time teaching in churches. And the courses are all available in French, and the students get copies. And many of these students are people who are already in ministry. And so what we're hoping is that as they're going through this class on a Saturday afternoon, and Ezekiel or Wycliffe is teaching them, they're looking at this course and thinking, well, I could do this. I could take this back home and teach my group. And that's what we want. We want them to be empowered and equipped to do that kind of a ministry. Over the border in the Dominican Republic, we have the Clermont family. When I was here last time, we were probably talking about sending them. And they are there now, missionaries from Haiti to the Dominican Republic and doing ministry training. This is the very first class that started a little over a year ago. And we are working on plans now to start extension sites in different places. The churches are growing in the Dominican Republic. We're excited about that. One church that started in this storefront building a few year ago, and the great pastor and family there. We bought a property property, started building. This has been a several-year process, but this is the state of it now. It's going to be a good-sized sanctuary, and so we're excited about what's happening there. In fact, just a few years ago, all of our congregations in the Dominican Republic were renting their buildings. Now all of those places have been purchased. Those places are other places that were alternatives, and they're not all finished buildings, but nobody is paying rent anymore. And so we're excited about that. Every one of our churches is completely locally sustained. We're not spending a dime either in Haiti or the Dominican Republic. We're not spending a dime on rent or building maintenance or pastor salaries. Every church is locally sustained, and what we help them with is building their capacity, strengthening the local church, building what they have. This place we bought a few years ago, and the next picture you're going to think is something different, but it's the same place. What we did is built out on that upper level, brought it out to the sidewalk, and that's what it looks like now. It's still not finished. It does accommodate more people this way, but some of it's open air, and we need to take it on up, put a new roof, and finish that building. So they often, for their main services, they have many people out in the open air, crowded around the windows just like this. This building we bought a few years ago, and they opened up the whole top level for the sanctuary, and they are out of room there now and needing to expand. There's no room to expand on the property, but the building next door is for sale. I don't even know the price. We didn't ask. But if we could get that property that's beside that one, that would provide a way that church could expand. The little village of Cajaco, ministry there was started by the church I just showed you. Some of them went out there, shared the gospel. A bunch of people got saved. They started a little church, rented in this little building for a while. And this was the first pastor. He was actually a converted witch doctor. When people came around while he was still in his old life and practicing his magic arts, but his wife was sick, and he could not heal her, couldn't help her, and they prayed with her, and God healed her. And so her husband said, well, the power of God is greater than anything I've been in touch with. And he eventually became a Christian and later actually became the pastor of that little church. He's back in Haiti now, and so we do have a different pastor there now. We bought the property, and this was a temporary structure. 60 people are probably meeting there, maybe more, right now on a Sunday morning. They're on the same time about as we are. And this is the current pastor. He's a small guy, but he's got a wife and he's got 8 children. Can you imagine? And they live in a house that's smaller than this platform. It might be 2/3 the size of this platform. And he parks his motorcycle in the kitchen because you got to keep it inside at night. So be thankful for your space, right? This is the new building going up there where God is providing and helping. And it's going to be a good-sized building. It's going to take up most of the lot. And we do actually have a roof on that one now. And they are probably having services in the new building today. So these are things we're doing in that country. And not everywhere are we doing building projects, but there where we have congregations that are very committed and doing what they can, locally sustained, that we're helping them to expand and make room. Jesus gave the disciples a special instruction when he told them to go to Jerusalem and wait for that special work of the Spirit. And, of course, as holiness people, we've got a lot of theology that we pack into that event, but there's one distinctive result that Jesus mentioned would happen. He said, you'll receive power. And this power would motivate them, compel them to be witnesses. And they would be continually reaching farther. There's something about the very nature of the gospel. It's different from other religions. There are religions that do conquest, and there are religions that make some effort to spread their message, but there's something about the gospel, the good news. It's a special information that we are driven to carry, and we know that everybody in the world urgently needs it. And we don't go for our own sake to build our own thing. We go for their sake and for Christ's sake. And so Jesus told them that would be a mark of this work of the Spirit that would compel them to constantly be reaching farther. As a mission organization, that's what we are thinking about all the time. Now, as a local church, you're finding ways to reach farther, and for you, it's not just geographical. Farther doesn't mean in miles necessarily. It means reaching in new ways, thinking of the people around you that are not being reached, people that are being overlooked, ministries that need to meet other kinds of needs that are not being met. And so those are challenges that face all of us as Christians to find ways to reach farther. Now, with us as a mission organization, it does mean miles. It does mean geography, and I like maps. I've got maps on my wall in my office because that's how I keep track of where we are and where we need to go. And I really believe that when Jesus said to take the gospel to the uttermost part of the earth, that means the farthest point, I think he meant that we should be looking at some maps and figuring out where we need to go. Amen? And so when we think about this great task, though, we realize pretty quickly we've got a labor problem, right? Jesus said the harvest is great, but the laborers are few. And I want to give you a number. They say that at the current rate of mission work, there are 3 billion people in the world, people who are alive right now, that are not going to hear the gospel before they die. Now, I want you to think about that. These are people that live in areas where there are restrictions, where you can't just go in and build a church and put up a steeple, put out your sign, and pass out your flyers. You just can't do that in Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan or Kyrgyzstan. And we're in some of those places, and I want to tell you about that today. But these are places that are restricted where nobody, now not whole nations necessarily, but areas where nobody is preaching the gospel, and it doesn't look like anybody will be anytime soon. And because of that, they say these 3 billion people are not likely to hear the gospel before they die. Now, I don't know what that does to you. This is something I think about every day, because this is a burden that God has laid upon us. And with missions, we work in places where the gospel has been preached, where down the road there's another church, and there's nothing wrong with that. We have a place to fill and people around us who need to be reached. But I think there is no greater priority than to get the gospel to people who will not otherwise hear it. Can you think of anything? Now, I'm not saying it's the only thing that matters, but I think there's nothing that matters more than to get the gospel to people who are not hearing it. And so that's something that we have to be thinking about. Now, a labor problem, though, 3 billion people. How in the world do we even work at that? And we can work harder, we can give more, and we should be doing all that we can, but it's not just a matter of working harder, doing the same things we've always done. We're never going to reach them doing the same things we've always done. Right. It's going to take some new thinking, some new methods, some new ways. Even just considering the fact that traditional form of missionary work is illegal. You cannot, as an American, go through a place and have your passport stamped and go in and say, I'm here to be a missionary. No, they're not going to even let you in if you go in with that profession. And so it means that we have to, and that's most of the world. 80% of the unreached people are in those places where a missionary cannot officially go in as a missionary. 80% of them. Which means our normal way of working is never going to reach them, no matter how hard we work. And so we've got to do something different. I want to use a business illustration. Now, last time I was here, I gave the illustration of McDonald's. Anybody remember that one? Remember the point? The McDonald's serves almost 1% of the world every day, 68 million people every day. And no local place is big enough to do that. They do it by having almost 37,000 locations. And the point I made was, well, the only way we can reach the world is to plant many locally sustained gospel centers, churches all over the world. That's the only way we can do it. I want to make a different point today, talking about the labor problem. There is a taxi company that transports 5.5 million passengers every day. That's another mind-boggling number, isn't it? 5.5 million a day. Now, if we were going to try to start a company and we say we were very ambitious and we're going to start it in Indianapolis or Chicago and we want to carry thousands of passengers a day, how would we launch that? How many cars would we buy? Think about this. But Uber did not buy a bunch of cars. Instead, they said there are already cars in these places and people driving them, and so let's just have them carry our passengers for us. Simple, really simple, but a revolutionary idea that has revolutionized the taxi industry, much to the chagrin of some of the traditional companies. I've ridden on Uber. In fact, that picture is in Ukraine, and I've ridden on Uber in Ukraine. And other companies are starting up following this pattern. 5.5 million a day. They solved the labor problem for the taxi industry. Now, was it easy? No, they've had a lot of snags. There have been complaints. There have been challenges along the way, but it's definitely working. Now, can we learn something from Uber for mission work? I think we can, because we have the same challenge and maybe the same solution. We need lots of church planters, missionaries, pastors. Where are we going to get them? Our Bible colleges are great, and I've worked in them and still work for them sometimes, and we're just never going to get enough missionaries from there. I travel to churches like yours. We're just never going to get enough. We value those missionaries that we get. They're very important to us. The people who take the time to prepare and study and make that their focus, those people will accomplish things that nobody else will. But there's just not enough of them. We'll never reach 3 billion people. What if we could learn something from Uber? And when we go in and realize these places that are near the unreached, there are Christians there. Even in Saudi Arabia, Kyrgyzstan, whatever, there are Christians there. There are churches in those places. Now, sometimes they are not far from areas where there are unreached people. You don't have to go very far from the city of Karakol in Kyrgyzstan out into the countryside to villages and towns of maybe 10,000 people that have no church at all. And sometimes we talk about places that have no holiness church, but what about a place that has no gospel preaching church at all? People who grow up there, live out their whole life, possibly never getting well acquainted with a Christian and hearing the gospel their whole life, because there's just no church there. And so what if we learn something and we realize, okay, we need to train people, we need to recruit people and equip people to be pastors and evangelists and missionaries. And so we don't need to go into a place and build a building because there are already buildings there. We don't have to have an American go there because there are already people there who love God and have studied the Bible and they have their testimony. And if they were equipped, they would share the gospel and some of them would become missionaries. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to train Christians who are already near the unreached. And so I want to tell you about some places. Ukraine, of course, is where we were for 5 years, and Ukraine is our base, really, for Eastern Europe. Yeah, they have the most religious freedom of any of the Soviet countries, and almost without restriction, we can do ministry there. All of the others have restrictions to some extent, and some of these people that I'm going to tell you about are basically criminals in their country. They are as missionaries. But in Ukraine, we've gotten the courses translated into Russian and Ukrainian. We've printed at least 15,000 courses, and most of those are in circulation. Most of those are in the hands of people who are using them. More than 100 churches in Ukraine are using our courses. Now, these are not churches that belong to us. They're not affiliated to us. We have a full-time representative, Andre, the one in the white with the glasses, and he has worked for us now several years full-time. All he does is do training in churches and help them get started using the courses, and so to help them start their own training program. And so that's why there are more than 100 churches in Ukraine using our courses, and it's begun to spread. It's international now. He just trained a guy who moved to Poland to work with churches and train people there, and he's been to several other countries with us. And so we're getting contacts. For one thing, there are Russians and Ukrainians all over the place. They have immigrated to many other countries, and so that gives us a good base to start. And so sometime back we began to think, okay, we've done the hard part of getting this into Russian and Ukrainian. Why not do the easier part of finding ministries in these other countries that would use it? People who already have it on their heart to do ministry training, to raise up laborers. We can help equip them and give them something to use. And so we began to visit and make some connections in some other countries. Moldova was one where the Bible League has partnered with us, and Eugene is our representative there. Now, he doesn't work for us directly. He works for the Bible League. But we are helping them with the courses. He offers these among 120 churches. And they use Russian to some extent. But we began to realize the courses were not really spreading and catching on there like they were in other places. And so we asked them, well, do you really need it in your own language? And they said, yes, that we'll try it. If you want to help, get one done. And so we have translated the first one, Christian Beliefs, into Romanian, which is what they speak in Moldova. And since then, in just the last few weeks, it has taken off. This is another meeting that was held just a few days ago. Represents 30 churches. 30 churches are represented in that group right there. And most of those guys are pastors, and they're holding up the Romanian edition of Christian Beliefs that they got that day, and they're very excited about that. At least 75 pastors already have the new course in Moldova. And so that's an example of the thing we're trying to do throughout the former Soviet Union. Georgia, we visited there a couple years ago, made some really good connections with evangelical churches there, and since then we are now working actually on the 5th course in the Georgian language, and we printed a couple of them. That's the first one. Look at that print. Can you see that print there? It looks kind of oriental, but we're printing it in their own language, and they are excited about it, and they're making it available throughout their churches there. In Russia, we have Alexei and Michael. Michael is the one in the middle, the father of Alexei. He's a district superintendent. And they joined us just a few months ago, about a year ago, almost now. And they're doing a tremendous job working in Russia, visiting conventions and churches. And often they're sending me a note saying, we just met with a pastor and he wanted he bought the whole set of courses because he wants to use them in his church. And so that's happening constantly. Now, Russia is a huge country. And so they will never get around to all of it if they work for 100 years. And so we're praying that God will help us to find more people. And that's the main thing that I pray for and request prayer for, is that God will give us the people that we need in every place as we continue to grow. Not just people who will work for us. It's a great thing, with some of these people, they work for us and we support them. But Eugene, it doesn't cost us anything. The ones in Georgia, it doesn't cost us anything because they don't work for us. They already have a ministry. And we're just helping. We help with the translation and printing to get them started. But those ministries are going to go on with or without us. We're just equipping them. Now, in other countries, we don't find somebody like that. And we have to start with somebody who will become a representative and work there for a while and help get it going. And so these guys are examples of that. Now, most of these places that we go into, we do not find holiness churches, much less conservative holiness churches. And so where do we get our recruits? We don't find people who come from our background, who would understand many of the things that we believe and teach and practice. They come, but they're people who love God. They're people who have a heart for ministry. And so it's either use them or not do anything there. Because we don't have Americans to send to most of these places. And if we did, it would be very difficult for them to work there. Language is a big barrier, but that's not even as big as some of the other things, just the whole legality of an American being there. As I mentioned, in some of these places, what our representatives are doing is illegal, and an American would not get by with it for a month. He would be in trouble and get other people in trouble. And so somebody who is from there, or at least from the Soviet Union and already speaks Russian, can accomplish much more. And so we are doing what we can with the people that God brings to us. Farther to the east in Asia, but some of it's still part of the former Soviet Union, in Kyrgyzstan, Nuria was our first full-time representative in that country. She was a school teacher. She taught full-time for 3 years, taught elementary, and she has resigned from that job and is now full-time with us, has been for several months, and doing a tremendous job. And she teaches a variety of kinds of groups, youth groups, and besides making the trips to visit churches and take them through some of the training from the courses and help get them started. Our representatives are very mobile. Andre, very early on, he faced the challenge of many churches that said, well, yeah, these courses are great. Come and spend a week and take us through one, or come every Saturday and take us. And we made the decision, no, we can't do that, because there are churches all over the country that would love that. But what we've got to do is equip people locally. And so he does spend a day or more, sometimes in a place, but it is with the goal that there's going to be somebody there who's going to learn how to do it. And that's what has happened. God has helped to make that happen. And so this was a class that went through one of our courses in Kyrgyzstan. Same thing with the language. There are places, many of them speak Russian. Our representatives all speak Russian. Some speak English, some don't. But in their local countries, often the courses need to be in another language. And so for Kyrgyzstan, it's Kyrgyz. And so we have printed the first one in Kyrgyz, and it is beginning to spread. And think about the situation. See, in the cities, people who've gone to school, especially if it was a few years back, it was probably in Russian. But if you live out in a village, you may not speak Russian at all. And that's where churches are most needed. There are churches in the towns, in the big cities, but there are many, many towns that have no church at all. And people go out there and evangelize and disciple and try to get things going there. But how do you train people there? How do you develop somebody to become a pastor to lead these new struggling groups? They need it in their own language. And if they don't speak Russian or English, they may never have in their hands a book that teaches them about how to teach the Bible or Christian beliefs. And so we're really meeting a need that possibly nobody else is meeting for many of these places. Kim Bott joined us some time back, and she also lives in Kyrgyzstan, and she is our international representative for Asia now. We have a great leader in Ukraine for Eastern Europe, and now, Asia is a long ways away. Kyrgyzstan is a long ways from Ukraine, and so we realized we need to set up another zone, another region, and have another team developing there. And so we have that forming, and she is just amazing in her organizational ability and in her passion. She was working in a student ministry when we found her. She evangelizes and teaches students, and mostly working with people from a Muslim background and people who are persecuted. And much of what she is doing and what Naria is doing are things that are against the law in their country. But they're getting people saved, and they're helping disciple. And so Kim Bott has a great vision for getting things into the other countries. And so just since she started, she has gotten the first Kazakh translation finished, and it will go to press very soon. That's for Kazakhstan, which is beside Kyrgyzstan. She's got somebody working on the first Uzbek translation in Uzbekistan, and she's got the first Turkish one going for Turkey and some other places that speak Turkish besides Turkey. And so it will be a significant language. And so to start in a brand new place that speaks a different language, having something to start with, having a course ready to go, is pretty well essential. If you go in without that, you can always have meetings and talk about what you hope to do someday, but if you don't have anything yet, they're skeptical, and it can be months down the road before you have the first one ready. So it really helps us to be able to launch a ministry in a new place if we have something in that language. I started early on, or in the middle somewhere. I gave you this number, the fact that 3 billion people are not likely to hear the gospel before they die at the current rate of mission work. I want to give you another number that's really part of that. 60,000 people born today are not likely to hear the gospel before they die because they're born in those same regions. Some of these numbers, now some people don't, big numbers just kind of are beyond their imagination. That's why a picture might help you realize this is very personal and individual. That's a little girl in a village in Liberia. Now, I could give you another number. 100,000 people or so will die today. Thousands have died since we started this service around the world. 100,000 people will die today, and at least 60,000 of them never heard the gospel in their life. They'll pass away today. Now, we can't do anything to reach those people that passed away today or will. But the ones that were born today, maybe we still have a chance. Amen. And so that's why I feel motivated, I feel driven to work in new ways, to recruit, to keep reaching out. To me, slowing down is not an option. We have to find ways, and I want to do things right. I want to do things with quality. I want to have good Christian foundation of everything we do. We look for the very best people, and sometimes I know when I meet somebody, that's the person we're going to need. When I met Kim Bott, I knew within a very short time, she's the person we need for Kyrgyzstan. And it was over a year before she joined us, but we stayed in contact, and she's doing a tremendous job now. And that's the thing we pray for, that God would give us those people as we travel around. There's always people looking for jobs, but we're not just wanting to hire somebody, we need somebody who has a passion for this. We don't pay great wages anyway. Some of these people have high qualifications and they could get better jobs somewhere else. But we need people who have a passion for this, for raising up laborers to reach the lost. And so I'm excited about what God is doing, and it is a privilege to share with you today. These are some of the things that we've talked about that we're working on, and we encourage you, if God lays it on your heart, give amounts either that help with projects, or if you want to take on something that is more routine, helping support one of these young people. Some of them are single people, some of them are married and have families. Andre in Ukraine has a wife and 3 children. Onas in Haiti in Dominican Republic has a wife and 3 children. Some of the others are single. But for all of them, what it takes to support them is much less than what it would take to send an American family to go live in a foreign country. And all of them are working with ministries that are locally sustained. So that means that while we have to support these representatives, they are working with churches that are locally sustained. And so whatever they accomplish in those churches is going to continue, is going to develop. And if that representative ever stops, that work will go on. That work will continue. That's one of the great things about ministry training. Whatever amount you can do will help, even if you can't do everything that you would like to do. And so the translations are another thing that are really important. And the cost of them varies widely depending on situations in a country. And I think we've got, 500 that the Kyrgyz translation is costing us. Some are quite a bit more than that. But I don't know of anything that could have more impact than getting ministry training into the hands of zealous people who love God and want to share the gospel with their neighbors. And so if you're interested in investing even in a regular basis, this is ongoing. Between us and some other missions, we are working on more than 20 languages now. Some are almost done, some are just getting started. And some of these represent populations of 300 million people, like Hindi. Or Arabic. And so if you're interested in contributing regularly, our website, go to holiness.pilgrim.com. There is an easy place to click. If you like, a lot of people, some people don't even use checks anymore. Can you imagine? There's just something wonderful about a check, but some people, it's all just in the air now. You click and give. If that's the way you want to do it, we want to make it easy for you to do it. And so you can go there and do it, and even do it recurring if you want to, either from credit card or PayPal or bank account. So whatever God lays on your heart, most of all, pray for us. And it is a privilege to share it with you. And Pastor, I want to turn the service back over to you.
Thank you. Did you enjoy that?